The wealthiest city per capita in the New World disappeared in less than 3 minutes. Port Royal, Jamaica, held more gold per square foot than Boston, New York, and Philadelphia combined. By 1692, it was gone, and most people today have never heard its name. The city didn't fall to war or fire. It fell into the sea during an earthquake. It took with it the most complete record of 17th-century Caribbean urban life we will never fully recover. I've spent years studying what remains beneath 40 feet of water and sediment, frozen in time like a tropical Pompeii. Port Royal occupied approximately 53 acres at the tip of the Palisados Peninsula. By 1692, the city contained over 2,000 structures, many of them multi-story brick buildings rare in the Caribbean. The city's taverns, warehouses, and merchant houses were packed so tightly that streets averaged 20 feet wide. A land grant survey from the Jamaica archives shows plots measured in square feet, not acres. The concentration was extraordinary. Port Royal had more brick buildings per acre than any other city in the Americas at that time. Every brick had been imported from England as ship ballast. The cost of those bricks exceeded the cost of the timber used for framing. Merchants wanted permanence. They wanted their buildings to project stability and wealth across generations. That city built with imported bricks to project permanence would survive less than 4 decades before sliding into the ocean. The irony is almost unbearable. They built to last centuries. Picture this. You are standing at the intersection of High Street and Queen Street in 1692. Brick townhouses rise 3 stories on both sides. Their upper floors jut out over the narrow street. The smell of rum, tar, and salt air mixes in the tropical heat. Merchants in sweat-stained linen conduct business in doorways. Enslaved laborers haul barrels from the wharf just 1 block away. The noise is constant. Hammers, voices in 6 languages, the creak of ship rigging. The harbor lies just 1 street over. You can see masts above the rooflines. Everything here is built on commerce, on movement, on the exchange of goods pulled from every corner of the Atlantic world. But wealth this concentrated needed protection, and Port Royal's fortifications were as impressive as its commerce. Fort James, the largest of 6 forts ringing the harbor, mounted over 100 cannons by 1690. The fort's magazines stored 60 tons of gunpowder in a reinforced brick structure. A dedicated artillery crew of 80 men maintained constant watch over the harbor entrance. A 17th-century military report describes the armament in detail. Step inside. Stand on the ramparts of Fort James at dawn. The harbor spreads before you. 60 ships lie at anchor, their masts like a forest. Cannon barrels are still warm from yesterday's practice firing. Below, in the fort's courtyard, soldiers drill in formation. The walls feel solid, 10 feet thick. Every stone has been mortared into place. You can see clear across the harbor to the blue mountains rising in the distance. Everything here is built to last centuries. What you cannot see is what lies beneath. The fort's walls were built directly over a layer of loose sand and coral rubble. There was no deep foundation. It was a construction shortcut that saved time and money. The most heavily armed fortification in the Caribbean, designed to withstand naval bombardment, could not withstand the ground beneath it turning liquid. The merchants who paid for these defenses lived in a district that rivaled anything in London for luxury. Thames Street ran parallel to the waterfront for half a mile. It was lined exclusively with merchant houses and counting rooms. A 1688 tax assessment listed 43 merchants on Thames Street. Each had a personal estate valued over £2,000 sterling. That figure represented more wealth than most English towns could claim in total. The street featured covered walkways with second-floor galleries. Merchants conducted business there, overlooking the harbor. They could watch their ships come in. They could negotiate deals in the shade. Many Thames Street buildings had deep, brick-lined cellars. These cellars extended 15 feet below street level. In the tropical heat, they were the coolest spaces in the city. Merchants used them to store perishable goods. Wine, sugar, fabrics, anything that needed protection from the heat. Probate inventories from the Jamaica archives list entire fortunes stored underground. Those cellars became death traps during the earthquake. The coolest, safest rooms they could build became the first spaces to flood and collapse when the land liquefied. Merchants stored their wealth in the place that would betray them first. At 11:43 in the morning on June 7th, 1692, the ground began to move. 3 minutes later, 2/3 of Thames Street was underwater. The physical mechanics of what happened are almost impossible to believe. The earthquake triggered soil liquefaction in the loose sand and coral foundation. Buildings didn't crumble or explode. They tilted and sank vertically. Eyewitness Edmund Heath described watching a brick church steeple sink as if by a screw. When it stopped, only 5 feet of the steeple remained above ground. Modern archaeological evidence shows buildings remained largely intact as they sank. Room layouts survived. Contents stayed in place. Some multi-story buildings sank so uniformly that their upper floors ended up at ground level. People walked across rooftops that had been third stories just minutes before. The earthquake preserved what it destroyed. It created an underwater archaeological site more intact than most excavated ruins. We have Pompeii in ash. Port Royal is Pompeii in sand and seawater. Walls crack vertically, then walls crack vertically, then they separate, then they slide toward the sea. Entire blocks of Thames Street tip forward in slow motion. Buildings don't crumble. They descend, almost gently. They are swallowed by sand that suddenly behaves like liquid. The church steeple sinks straight down as if the earth is pulling it under. In 3 minutes, 40 acres of city simply disappear below sea level. They are replaced by churning water thick with debris. The city that was lost in minutes has taken centuries to partially rediscover. Underwater archaeological projects began in the 1950s. Divers mapped what they could reach. They found streets. They found doorways. They found rooms filled with artifacts exactly where they had been left 3 centuries earlier. But the sediment is thick. The visibility is poor. Much of the site remains, buried or too fragile to excavate. We can visit the ruins, but we cannot fully map them. The surviving fraction of Port Royal, less than 1/3 of the original city, remains a quiet fishing village today. The submerged ruins lie protected as an underwater archaeological park. Divers can visit, but they can never fully document what remains. Port Royal was not gradually abandoned or slowly forgotten. It was erased in the time it takes to boil water. The buildings, the streets, the counting rooms full of gold, they still exist, but they exist in a form we can visit only in fragments. If there is another lost place you want me to reconstruct, let me know in the comments.